Hello, my name is Megan Sheridan. I work for the Vermont Grass Farmers Association. Today we're going to be speaking with agronomist and grazing specialist Sarah Flack, an agronomist and pollinator specialist Laura Johnson. We're going to talk about the why to soil sample your New England pastures, when to take those soil samples, where to take those soil samples, and how to take those soil samples. So let's start off with Sarah Flack.
My name's Sarah Flack, and I'm a consultant. And I work with grass-based livestock producers, primarily ruminants, so cows and sheep and goats. And I work with them on both the financial aspects of managing a grass-based operation and also on the agronomy. Everyone should be regularly testing their soils. This is just a very small, simple soil probe for taking a sample. You're going to want to take a composite sample all over the field while you're carrying a clean pail with you. So you're going to take multiple cores out of your pasture. You're going to put it into the bucket and mix these together and then have it be a composite sample. There's some great online resources on how many cores to take, how deep to take it. And the reason it's really important to get a real soil test to give you that chemical analysis is that you can do the visual assessment, you can look at whether the soil is too wet or too dry, you can look at the compaction, but you may have a pH that's too low, so your soil is too acidic. You might be missing some essential trace minerals or macro minerals that are inhibiting plant growth. And especially if you're going to spend any money on seed, or if you're buying in expensive fertilizers or wood ash or lime, you really want to know exactly what to spread. So I recommend that everybody test their soils to begin with, to get a baseline on all of the soils on the farm. And then generally, you're going to want to test the soils at least every 3 years, or anytime you're about to invest money in seed and fertility inputs. One of the other important reasons to be looking at our soil test is if you have an idea that your soil might be acidic, you don't actually know what you need to use to raise the soil pH unless you have a soil test to look at, because you might want to use wood ash so that you're providing potassium and calcium, or if you're just short on calcium, you might want to just use lime. And that makes a big difference in terms of the long-term stand in your pasture, how long it's going to stay, and making sure that you don't have imbalances in the nutrients in the soils caused by spreading the wrong thing or the wrong amount of things. So in terms of when to do the soil sampling, I generally recommend that the soils get sampled at about the same time every year. I prefer fall for soil sampling because it gets you ready for whatever you might do in the spring. And so that sort of late summer into fall before the ground freezes is probably a good time to do that sampling. You don't want to sample right after you've spread lime or wood ash because that tends to cake on the soil surface and makes taking the samples a little bit tricky. You also don't want to test right after you've just spread manure or other fertility inputs.
Now we will speak with UVM agronomist and pollinator specialist Laura Johnson about where and how to sample soils in your pastures.
When we are thinking about how we want to soil sample in our landscape, we've got a picture of the farm from above here, and we've got the soil types in this picture here. So we can see that open land where there's probably where the livestock is grazing. We can see that there are some distinct soil types in those different areas. And so that's one consideration we want to think about in terms of whether or not we take subsamples in this whole space or if we break it up into multiple spaces. So we can see one type of soil, over in this area, and then another type of soil over in this area. So I might divide those into 2 different sections. Within each of those areas, take probably 10 subsamples for one composite sample that I'm going to send to the lab. And then also looking, once we go out into the landscape, we'll have a better sense of, other differences in these spaces, but any major slopes or low points are also where we might want to think about sampling differently. But also considering the size of this area and the cost of sampling, those are other factors that are important to think about in terms of, how much do you actually want to spend on soil samples and how much do you actually want to break it down in terms of, your amendments and kind of results you get back. For the size of the land here, I would probably just break it into the soil types, unless when we go out into the field there's some like really serious differences.
Finally, let's tackle how to soil sample. On a day when the soil is moist, but not saturated, maybe a day or so after a rain, we're going to head out to the field with our clean bucket and tool of choice to collect 10 to 15 core samples that will make up our composite sample. Here are some of the tools you might use to take those samples. A shovel's okay, a soil knife is better, and a soil probe is best. Watch until the end of the video and we'll show you a really cool way to rig up a fast soil sampling process with a drill, bit, and a bucket. You are going to traverse across like terrain, leaving out any anomalies like wet areas. And with your bucket and your tool of choice, you will randomly collect 10 to 15 core soil samples that will make up your composite sample. There are many videos on the internet that will show you how to correctly take a core soil sample with a soil probe. Just Google it. If you don't have access to a soil probe, a soil knife or shovel will work. The process is basically the same for both tools. You remove a plug of soil, and then you take your core sample from one open end of the side of the soil profile. You will only be sampling 6 inches down. Soil knives generally have measurement indicated on the knife. Be sure to remove the top vegetative part of your core before putting it in your bucket for your composite sample. You may leave roots, just make sure to take any vegetation or debris out. When you send your sample to the lab, make sure to record the name of the field or area sampled, your name or farm name, the size of the area sampled, and the date. This information will help you and the lab keep your results organized.
You should always read the requirements of the lab. Between half a cup and a cup of soil is, I think, standard. If there's going to be some time between mailing it and it's sitting around, I usually stick my soil in the fridge until I'm ready to mail it.
If you have a lot of soil samples to take or need to take them on hard, dry ground, Google no sweat soil sampling for a detailed explanation of this innovative sampling technique. This video is brought to you by the Vermont Grass Farmers Association and the National Grazing Lands Coalition. It is partially funded by a USDA NRCS agreement.